Hey, I'm Sean Russell, the Cowtown Banker, and I'm here with Holly and Tasha from Two Girls and a Sold Sign. We just got pedicures.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
we
did.
did.
Now, I forgot about it immediately and put cowboy boots right back
I
on.
saw
but
that. I was like,
No,
what?
I've got my spring toes ready.
That's right.
She was also scrubbing my tattoo. I think it creeped her out a little bit. It was a new tattoo. I think it
Yeah.
creeped her
Oh,
out.
that probably, yeah.
It was
Probably.
gross. It was gross.
And Sean videotaped me getting my feet scrubbed.
Yes,
Oh, that's the
that-
worst part.
That's gonna be posted at the
Yeah.
at the very tail end of this. So stay tuned
stay
for
there
that
for details.
to see Tasha when
Yeah.
she giggles like a child. Okay, so what I want to talk to you guys, I had a just encouraging news. We hear so much bad news all the time, right? Everything's
do.
bad, everything's terrible. But economically speaking, we were talking about it while we were getting our pedicures, but
Yes.
I've realized for myself that a lot of times I don't think like a rich person. I don't
Right.
think like rich people do,
Right.
And I end up following and I end up feeling like I got burned and left out most of
Yes.
the time, right? But there was the guys at Fidelity at Baker Law Firm actually had a economic forum, and they had Dr. Dowser there, and he is an economic professor who goes all over the country, but he's a professor at A&M. I would say generally he leans, conservative, pretty openly conservative.
Right.
But he did two things. He goes through this report, and I'm going to show you guys everything you need to know about the report very, very quickly, because that's the sign of true genius, is
Right.
when someone can take something very complex like Stephen Hawking and make it very simple. So you're
Right.
going
Right.
to see how I do that. But more importantly, it's like looking at it and saying, like, we hear all this bad news, but more importantly, our customers hear this bad news, and it's dictating their behavior, right?
Yes.
So, I know I'm supposed to focus on that. So, I'm going to show you this report. I'm going
Okay.
to break it all down for
Okay.
you.
We're very interested.
Okay, see
Yes.
this right here?
Okay.
Okay,
Yep.
now this right here, that has to do with the economy. That has
Okay.
to do with jobs. Now, see, jobs are doing good.
Yep.
Now,
Okay.
merit savings, see that?
Yep.
Right.
And that's it. That's all you need to
That's
know.
all we get?
That's
Yeah.
it.
That's
You
it?
guys get it, though, right?
Yeah,
mean,
we
yeah.
get it.
No, here's the most important part of it. I wanted his synopsis. What he was talking about is the fact that, and again, most people have heard for 2 years we've been hearing about we're going to hit this recession. We're all going into recession. So hold off. Again, what I've noticed with my applications is the type of economic profile
Right.
these people have.
Yeah.
I've got first-time buyers who just need a house, right? They
Right.
just need a house. Their rent's coming up,
Right.
and that's why they're moving. Then I've got on the other end of the spectrum, people with a lot more money than me are moving money into real estate. So what am I doing? This is the sites about the recession. The people that are on the fence have been on the fence because of rates, which
Right.
we can
Right.
discuss.
Right.
But let me tell you what he says on here. And again, he looks at it like it doesn't really matter who the president is. It doesn't matter, like the politics, it doesn't make as much difference as people think.
Right.
Depending on what news source you're listening to is going to steer how your behavior, and that's the mistake that we make, because we don't
Right.
realize, remember, they're just trying to sell Chevys. They're just trying to sell Starbucks. You don't want to be a sucker and go for the branding and all that stuff, right?
What? Be the brand.
So it would be the brand. Okay, so here's some things that he said make recession incredibly unlikely in 2024. And his very bullish behavior. He basically gives some bullet points. One is we've had, and remember, when you think about it in this context of, he's talking about nationally what's happened, not just necessarily what's happened in Texas.
Right.
So you
Right.
have to also sort of look at these numbers from a Texas perspective and say, it's even more increased, because the worse it gets elsewhere, the better all these numbers that I'm about to mention are doing even better when you take Texas into consideration. But this, again, is the national news. It's supposed to be so bad. Okay, so there's been continued employment growth. So despite everything going on in the economy, all the bad news about jobs and everything like that, and the inflation, which that's a real issue
Right.
for sure. But still, jobs growing, companies investing, companies hiring people is still happening. Again, especially in Texas. Wages have continued to grow. In fact, rapidly for the first time in most of our lifetime. Wages have been growing for the last few years,
Right.
and they're continuing to
Yeah,
grow.
that's a good thing.
Consumers have a lot of debt capacity. There's this idea that we're leveraged. Now, as a country, we're $33 trillion in debt. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
That's
But
a lot.
as individuals, we have debt capacity. That's a good thing. The credit bureaus look at the same thing. A 30-year credit score is based on capacity, right? So there's still a lot of money in checking savings. There's still an investment, a higher amount of just cash sitting in bank accounts than there has been in this country. Corporate profits are still incredibly high. Imagine that corporation still making money in America.
Yeah.
And stock prices are still high. The stock market's done remarkably well. I was pleasantly surprised when I opened up my 401k statement and saw how it's
Yay.
done. I was
Yeah.
expecting, depravity, because again, in 2008 and 9, that housing crisis looked a lot different.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you an interesting fact about that I also learned from another economic forum at that time in 2008 and 9. That was the last big housing bubble that people are trying to compare this to,
Yes.
which it's nothing
Not
like
this.
it.
Right.
But do you know what the growth was in DFW specifically during that time? You guys were what, 12? Just kidding.
No.
I wish.
No.
Yes, I was.
supposed to say
13,
yes.
actually.
So housing prices in DFW went up by an average of 5% during
Right.
2008 and 9. So while the rest of the country, again, if you're in Arizona, you're in Delaware, these are problems you should be concerned with, but here housing grows. Well, year over year for us right here, we're looking at about an 8% growth in housing prices.
Yeah.
Now that's, part of the inflation problem
Right.
too. So let's go. The
Yeah.
only 3 reasons he said these are 3 things to consider. Okay. Consumers are constrained by higher prices. So inflation is still very real. There's been a small scale amount of layoffs. So even while there is job growth, there still has been some layoffs happening in different parts of the country. Companies are slowing business travel. So that affects obviously local economies. So those are the 3 reasons he listed were negative, and he listed the others are positive. And I will repost this at least, this part of the section, because I think it's something to remember that when you talk about the economy, there's the national economy, but more importantly, all real estate is local.
Right.
So
Right.
my question to you guys is, what is the mentality of the borrowers? Like, what are they afraid of? What's kind of keeping them holding back? Because we know the numbers of people that have moved here. We've got job growth nationwide. Why are we not seeing the numbers? What does it look like from you guys that we should see in terms of applications and contracts and things like that?
I just think generally people don't understand how economics work,
Right.
Right.
and that they look at the interest rates and that being the center focus of moving forward and building personal wealth instead of looking at all the financial variables across the board. I think we just focus on that key factor, which is very damaging. I mean, from an economic standpoint, interest. I don't want you to loan my money out at 2%.
Right.
But we sort of trick people into thinking that was a positive, and it's not a positive.
Right.
Because now we're dealing with inflation. So I think people need to understand how that the more normal historic rates, 6, 7, 8%, well, maybe not 8%, are actually more positive for the
Economy.
the
Yeah.
economy.
It's an
and
indicator.
personal wealth.
It is. Yeah.
And by the way, looking at a 30-year curve of rates, that when the government is not intervening, again, doesn't matter who the president's been over the last 20 years, where we've seen these 2 and 3% interest rates, you're talking about social intervention by the government. So the
Right.
same people that hate socialism are the same people that love those rates.
Well,
so when the
Right.
government is not being socialist, let's just say, rates average mid-5s. And right now, just my latest that I'm hearing is basically the Fed meetings that are going to be happening more like in July is going to be a significant one to
Right.
watch. So, what happens to your customers if rates really drop into the 5? What does that look like for you
Well,
guys?
it's going to get busy. I mean, everything that we've seen and forecasted is, the rates are going to come down, and all those people that have been waiting to move because of the rates, they're going to start going, and it's just going to be one of those route races again, and which,
And I think that's something that people who are considering selling their current home right now need to focus on and sit down and really devise a plan, because when rates do drop, and if they do drop, I mean, people will only put life off for so long.
Right.
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
If people have gone from 2 to 3 kids, or they want to move close to their mom because she has health issues,
Right.
or they want a better quality of life, they want to move out, or
Right.
they want to build a pool or whatever.
Yeah.
People will only put off their life for so long.
Right.
So
Yeah.
they'll find a way to finance it.
Yeah.
And so that will be positive for sellers. For buyers, that might mean you need to come up with $50,000 more to buy what you want.
Right.
Yeah.
There's an example that we use that I think we talked about this before probably, but a lot of people have been holding off buying because of rates.
Right.
And so we ran some analysis like on a $500,000 house, right? And I do a lot of custom homes, so that's kind of like my bread and butter kind of number around Parker County, for instance. So we looked at like, okay, when rates drop, rates start dropping, everyone's waiting. And so everyone seems to be in agreement that they're going to drop, which is why they've been waiting.
See.
So we ran an analysis and we're like, okay, if you stay in this loan for 2 years and rates are at 7% right now, and then rates drop to 5.5%, you save on a $500,000 house. You know, we ran numbers in the $5,000-$6,000 range in savings. What if prices on a $500,000 house go up by just normal 8%, which is actually on the lower end of where they've been? How
a
much
lot.
does that cost in a year or 2 years, especially?
Okay, $500,000 home, 8% in a year.
Can you do that in your head? Because I
Let's
couldn't.
see. About, what is it about?
I was
40?
hoping you were going to nail that
my
one because
God.
you have
Is
to
it
stick
about
the landing.
40K?
You have to stick the land. Yes, exactly.
About $40,000.
That's easily, like, especially when you're talking
Look,
a
I do
2-year
math.
period. I failed fundamentals of math at
Well, I
UTA
did too, but
pretty
I
recently.
picked up some
Yeah.
along the way.
But you're exactly right. So what you have people, again, that's been my mentality with wealth.
Yeah.
And not thinking in terms of wealth and building wealth and thinking so transactionally, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I lose it, because the reality is, if you're buying now, if you had a stack of cash to buy a house right now, are you going to be able to work out a better deal when rates are high and everybody else is on the fence, or when rates drop? So if rates drop to 5.5 and
Well,
the
if
market's flooded, what was that like for you guys back? I mean, how
It
many
was insane.
contracts
It was
did you
insane.
average with buyers under $500,000? What was it like? How many contracts would you expect to go out and have to write?
Probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah.
say. Yeah.
And that is writing appraisal guarantees and guaranteeing cash over list
giving your
prices.
left
You know, and
leg
Giving
or
away
whatever.
all your rights, basically. All rights. If you'll
Yeah,
just
absolutely.
accept this, I won't
Yeah.
even make you prove it's worth this
Yes.
much.
Yes, I
Yeah.
mean it was insane.
Yes.
I mean people. Yeah, I mean the market was moving and shaking, but it was frustrating
Wow.
even for us just to be able, because our clients were frustrated, which
Yeah.
is not an easy thing to
No.
navigate.
Yeah. Well, and I know there is a real thing you mentioned right before the cheese grater hit your foot and you started giggling like a child. You mentioned the buying power that people have, right? My mentality has been like, look, there may be ways we can work this out now,
Yeah.
and then here's what the savings would look like long term, because you're not going to be in this loan very long. By the way, our bank doesn't charge on the refinances, so, and a lot of banks are offering
Right.
similar incentives
Right.
because they're trying to get you off the fence and say, look, let's do this now, refinance later into something better.
Right.
But that buying power, what are you kind of seeing? You mentioned some numbers like that $500,000 deal.
Yeah,
Now
I
somebody's
mean,
cap is lower.
Absolutely. I feel like if you dialed back into early 2022 or 2021, I feel like somebody's buying power would have been maybe around 500K.
Right.
And now we're looking at, you know, a $350,000
Most
house. So yeah, and I mean, in a different type of house. I mean,
Yep.
you're talking about subdivision, neighborhood, 1,800 square feet, maybe stretching it. And now we're looking at a very, very different product.
Right.
Compared to what they could buy 2 years ago. But the refinance, I mean, even if you don't buy the house you want today, you bought a house, you wait 2 years, we're increasing 8% a year.
Right.
Still making a good.
You've
Yeah.
got a good
amount of
nest
equity.
egg to,
Yeah.
you know,
That's that wealth mentality
It is.
versus consumer transactional mentality.
Well, 90% of all millionaires build their wealth through real estate.
Yeah.
So we might want to
Well,
catch
there
on,
you go.
right?
Yeah,
Let's do
exactly.
it.
Maybe.
Yeah, crypto. You know, that's what's. And we also were talking about crypto.
Crypto
Isn't it funny
money.
that we have so many of our friends that are risking their money in that still?
Yeah.
You know,
But
and
not real
I'm not
estate.
saying they're. I'm just. I know it's beyond my ability. I failed already. I've already been a crypto failure, but people were willing to throw their money into that, and it's like, here's real estate. Here's something tangible that's been a proven winner. That has been
Yeah.
the one thing, especially in Texas, that the government, Wall Street, all the things that we as Texans have a tendency to want to push off, no matter what side of the spectrum
Yeah.
you may be
Yeah.
on. We still don't trust
I mean-
many outside of us, but they can't screw it up, you
Yeah.
know. But
Yeah.
we'll throw money in crypto.
And there's so many positives about being a homeowner. I mean,
Yeah.
there are.
Well,
And
or starting a real estate portfolio.
yes, and having
Buy a
multiple,
duplex today.
Yeah, having
Yep.
multiple streams of income through those investment properties.
Yeah.
So those are good things
Yeah.
and wealth that you can have.
Yep.
That's-
And that's a good point too, because here's what's going to happen. Rates drop. Let's say you owned a house and you have it financed on today's rates, right? So they're going to be a little bit inflated, but
Right.
you have somebody come in and you rent the house to Tosya, you know. And after you rent it to her, the rent's $3,000 a month. That's covering your mortgage and everything, right?
Right.
Well, now rates have dropped. You've refinanced down to 5.5. Are you going to give that savings to
Right.
Tosya?
You're still going to
Your
charge her
landlord,
$3,000.
your
Yes.
landlord does not give you savings
No, they do
on
not.
their reduced rates when they
Yes.
refinance.
Yes, and that's
Not how that works. They're building their wealth.
That's
Yes.
right, and that's how rich people think, and that's why I'm not rich.
Yeah.
So,
So we're out here today with you
yes,
to change the mentality.
Yes.
we sure are.
We're
We're
on
going
a
to
mission.
change the world. Yes, we are. No, I'm going to send you a couple things that I think will be helpful too, and it's going to show with different rate options as an example on 2 house prices, and then you can share those with your customers, and
Yeah,
I'll share the same
absolutely.
thing, because then they can see, okay, here's the price today. If I can squeeze into this now, here's where we think rates are going to go. And if you're a believer in the majority of the economic smarter people than me, as I call them, then this is a way that you can look at what is this really going to cost me long term.
Yeah.
It may hurt a little bit for the next year to 2 years. I got to tighten the belt, but this is what the
Yeah.
long term
It'll
picture
be
looks
so
like.
worth it in the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us here at Starbucks, and
Yes.
we'll see you at the next pedicure.
Absolutely.
See you next
Bye.
month.